Welcome back to Kingdom Conversations with Tahir, the Gospel Engineer. I want to thank everyone for tuning in and for checking out our first couple of episodes. If you haven't seen them yet, they are available everywhere that you listen to or watch podcasts. We're on YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spreaker, Deezer, Podchaser, Pod Addict, and now Castbox. That's the new one. That's 10 formats that allow you to engage in our conversation. Please subscribe so that you'll never miss a conversation. Also, if you find what we're doing helpful and informative, please tell your friends and your family about us and share the podcast with them. Now, usually I like to start off with some anecdotes or stories about myself. Today, I want to get right to it. So today, my guest is someone who I've known for just over 8 years. It seems like it's been a lot longer due to the nature of our mutual endeavors. And so we met way back in 2012 at Southwest College in Chula Vista, California. We weren't attending there, but we were preparing to participate in a physical fitness evaluation and qualification for our new job with the Bureau of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, also known as CBP. And so I had just returned to Southern California after a few years back in the Chicago area, while he was only a few miles from where he actually grew up in National City. So our time at the Law Enforcement Academy drew us together as we discovered that we were just a few of the 48 recruits in our group who professed Christianity and who promoted Christian values. Namely, we prayed, we didn't use profanity, we didn't get drunk, we didn't objectify or degrade women, and we were always willing to help out our brothers and our sisters. So we also played basketball together.
Let's get it.
We ran together, and although he was a much stronger distance runner than I ever was, I did my best to keep up. We discovered that we both also sing and led worship at our churches. And let me tell you, his voice is amazing. Don't let him tell you any differently. So we both were assigned to work in Calexico, California. It's about 100 miles east of San Diego and about 60 miles west of the Arizona border. And so we bonded over our beliefs and our shared future locality. We looked out for each other. We encouraged each other and one another, and we've kept in touch over the years. And so he's worked as a teacher at a private Christian school prior to becoming an officer, and a few years later was led by God to leave the agency to pursue full-time ministry, a move met with a lot of criticism. However, I recognize the extreme courage and boldness that he exemplified by stepping out on faith and being led by the Spirit of God. So he's now married. He's serving as pastor of the interim pastor, I should say, at Center Church, San Diego. And like so many other churches in America, he has Google. My Apple Watch is talking to me in the middle of the podcast. So, like I was saying, like so many other churches in America, he has adjusted his approach to ministry due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so he's an excellent teaching pastor. He's a great husband, a good friend, a wonderful singer. He's also a nurse, which means he not only cares for your physical body, but also ministers to your spiritual body and your soul. So please welcome my friend, my brother, Joshua Pascua. What's up, my brother?
What is good, man? That intro, my guy. I felt like I was like,
can I set him up or what? Can I set him
Bro, man, that's what's up, man. I could take the world on right now, boy. Wow, thank you. That was, man, very, very humble to be here today. Thank you for inviting me to here. And, just like what you had just mentioned here a little bit ago, man, I could not imagine going through the academy, going through those, couple years of being with the agency, without kind of a big brother like you who really set the tone, especially, man, throughout training, that you stood up for what you believed in. honestly really looked up to you throughout all these
Wow.
years, and I really appreciate your faithfulness to the Lord because it encouraged me even when I was weak. So shout out to you, bro. Thanks for
Man,
having me today.
I appreciate that. And you know, it's always helpful to see that there's somebody else out there who's like-minded, who's willing to, you know, stay the course.
Mhm.
And seeing your faith also encouraged me and helped me to kind of stay on course with it. So mutual appreciation right there, man. For
Right,
real,
right.
for real. You're a good brother, good dude. And that's why I have you on my podcast, man.
Praise God, man. Praise God,
No,
man.
no scrubs on the podcast.
you're, oh, you're tripping. Oh, I love it. I love it.
So I want to get into a few topics with you. You are one of, I mentioned it in the intro, but you are one of the few people that I know who has given up their good government job uh, to do ministry full time. And so we've probably talked about it before, but if you can, for the listeners, what was that? How did you come to that decision, and
Right.
what was the subsequent journey for you like as you gave up the full-time government job and pursued ministry full time?
Right, right, man. Great question. So I actually shared this at our church this morning.
Nice.
So really, wow, God really aligned things together. So obviously went, into being with U.S. Border Protection, sorry, CBP. Me and Tahir worked together, and I went through a period of time where I felt a lot of just not living out my purpose. If that makes sense.
Okay.
And as you know, it to hear just very secure job, right? There's you can move up, you can make some money, and I came to a place in my life where I was just really felt like I was not living out my purpose, if that makes sense.
It does.
There was a period of time where I was actually very far away from the Lord
Hmm.
during when I was an officer, just to be real
Oh
frank with
wow.
you. And I still came to a place where I was living a secure lifestyle. I was making really great money. I was a single dude, right?
Yeah.
But there was a lack of purpose. I felt like I was fulfilling in my life, and I couldn't
Hmm.
shake that.
Yeah.
Just a feeling I couldn't shake. I had just met a girl recently. I was
Hey.
dating her, and she's my wife today. And she invited me to her church, and
Hmm.
this church was called Center Church. Might sound familiar to some of you guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I started going with her. Just we're dating at the time, and God started working on my heart. And I remember at one of the first services that I went, after the service, this is when we were in Bankers Hill. Excuse me, Barrio Logan.
Right.
I went to Chicano Park. If you guys are from San Diego, you might know Chicano Park. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I sat there just really contemplating, like, God, how are you speaking to me? What's going on in my heart?
Hmm.
He started, God started to work on me. An opportunity opened up at Center Church, and
Wow.
the lead pastor at the time, he actually invited me on staff. I think he heard about, I went to Bible college. I kind of have an ability to speak or communicate the gospel.
Hmm.
He invited me to come on staff. So it was just kind of this God, right,
Yeah.
aligning all these things.
Cool.
Dude, tell you the truth, I went through a time where it was like, what am I doing? Like, I don't know about this. What are my coworkers gonna say? What's my family gonna say?
Yeah.
Coming from a Filipino background, especially if you worked hard to be, prestige is a huge thing in our culture. So
Yeah.
it's like, what are you doing? Right?
Yeah.
You're leaving this secure place to do what now? Like, what are
Yeah.
you doing? Right? So I really wrestled with that. And as God kind of worked that in my heart, He led me in a certain place. There came a time where I was like, I had to, I planned to put in my resignation. I planned to step into full-time ministry,
Hmm.
right? And I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know what I'm doing. I prayed, God, give me boldness and give me like the bravery to say what you need me to say, even if
Yeah.
the, if the government doesn't understand, my family doesn't understand. I need to step into what you're calling me to do.
Right.
So as God worked in my heart, I told this story this morning.
Wow.
I actually went to my boss, right?
Yeah.
For CBP, I went into her office and I let her know, hey, I'm putting in my resignation. I'm leaving, to do something. And they asked me the question, Joshua, what are you going to do? I was like,
I don't know.
right, gulp. I was like, well, my friend is planting a church in the center of the city. We don't have a building yet. We're actually meeting in an elementary school cafeteria.
Right.
It's one of the more poor parts of the city.
Right.
And we're gonna go and tell people about Jesus.
Yeah. How about
and
that?
I was so scared. I was so nervous, but God told me this is what you should do.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what she said to me after, bro?
What's
She
that?
said, hey, can I pray for you? I was like,
Really?
whoa, yes. I
That's
was like,
awesome.
what? Right. And my boss at the time prayed a prayer of blessing, a prayer of protection, a prayer of guidance over me that day as I had put in my resignation. I didn't know that she was a Christian. I
That's
didn't know she was
awesome.
a believer. And God kind of worked it out the way it was.
That's
That,
awesome.
and not to say that, my decision was not met with, hey, what are you doing?
Right.
Why are you leaving? But God kind of, I talked about this morning in our church. Sometimes the being bold, the decision to be bold, isn't about the results.
No,
it's actually about the
it's
obedience
the
to God.
obedience. You're right.
Man,
Man.
powerful. Even though that situation didn't change in respect to, hey, Josh, what are you doing? Or I don't understand why, but something changed in me.
Right.
Spiritual maturity grew in me. Trusting the Lord grew in me. God changed something inside of me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's how I came to go from law enforcement to kind of where I am today. That was kind of like the first fruits of what God was doing. So
yeah, but you had to go through that academy to get there, right?
Boy, yeah.
We had some very interesting times. Now,
Right.
most Filipinos that I know and are in contact with, most of them are Catholic. So did you
Yeah.
ever ascribe to Catholicism, or what was your come to Jesus moment? Are your parents Christian? Have they always been
Right.
Christian? What circumstances led to you accepting Christ?
Right. Great question, man. So I was fortunate enough to actually grow up in a home where my parents were believers.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so they actually came from a Catholic background,
Mm-hmm.
but really cool story. When before my parents were married, when my mom and her family moved here from the Philippines, they came here just trying to make a better life for themselves, so on and so forth. They actually used to live in apartments, down in Southeast San Diego,
Mm-hmm.
and there was an old couple, very old couple, who lived next door to them, who invited them to church.
Nice.
And that's how they came to know Jesus, because they used to take care of my little cousins.
Okay.
So that's how they were introduced to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And in turn, me and my sister now know the Lord because of that moment that happened for them.
Oh,
So
wow.
I actually grew up in a Christian home. We went to church as a kid, but it was because of that faithful couple who said, hey, I'd like to invite you to encounter God, or whatever the case may be.
I forgot you had a sister.
Yeah.
And so I was one of the blessed few who received the invitation to your wedding. And I think what is it, coming up on 5 years now, or
we're gonna come up on, oh, bro. Let me see here. Oh, I hope Bree doesn't see it, babe. I'm sorry.
Right.
No, we're coming up on, let's see here, for marriage coming up on 3 years, but
3
we've been
years.
together for 6. Yeah.
Okay. So wow.
Yeah.
Only 3 years ago. Wow.
Yeah,
But dude,
man.
I'm telling y'all, one of the nicest, most beautiful settings for a wedding and reception. Very, very nice. Like we enjoyed ourselves. The food was good. The music was
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
And we met some really cool people at the wedding too. So
yeah.
you guys have been married. What's so far in your relationship and in your marriage, what's been your biggest or your hardest marriage lesson that you've learned so far?
Ooh, man, great question. Um, I think it's communication. That's probably super trite or elementary to say.
Mm-hmm.
But so me and my wife, we are opposite people.
Yeah.
I'm extroverted. I love talking and being around folks. My wife, for those who don't know her, she's very introverted.
Yeah.
She has social anxiety.
Hmm.
She even deals with even anxiety and depression. It's a big part of her story, her God story.
Okay.
So that's been something very interesting to navigate. I've
Right.
never dated anybody with a strong anxiety like my wife,
Mm-hmm.
or even who deals with depression.
Yes.
So there's times where, as a husband, I don't understand, right, what she's going through. I don't get how she feels, or the things that make her shrink back and totally become like just can't operate, right? Because it's
Wow.
just a deep feeling of, man, struggle of like just being buried under depression. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
So that's been a huge one for me because I've never known that before. I've never
Mm-hmm.
experienced that before. So just learning who she is,
Right.
giving more grace than I'm used to
Mm-hmm.
because of where she's at. We're not at the same place, but understanding to be more selfless. Man, I thought I was a selfless dude. I
Yeah.
thought I was like, um, just a selfless guy. But man, God really showed me, like, man, you're a selfish guy, and you like things your way. You like it
Okay.
a certain way. And
Mm-hmm.
when those expectations are not met, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Man, I would man, get mad, or just react in a way that's less than Jesus. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like,
Right.
real selfish.
Oh
And
wow.
God showed me, man, there's lots of stuff for you to learn, Josh. There's lots of grace giving. There's lots of extra change of grace that you need to keep in your pockets because you thought you were like this dude before
Yeah.
or whatever, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
teaching you something.
So
God allowed me.
he
Yeah,
opened
go ahead.
up your
Go ahead.
heart. He opened up your mind,
Right,
your
right,
emotions.
right. He really like worked on a lot of areas that I thought were, man, I really got this thing together, but he's like, man, hey, you're broken just like everybody else is broken, man.
Yeah.
And we got to navigate those things, and we got to look underneath the hood. So I think the biggest one for us was communication
Man.
and navigating like who we are, because we're so opposite. Like being able to meet in the middle and
Yeah.
compromise and just love each other like Jesus did. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That's
Yeah.
where we are, man. That's where
You,
we are.
it's interesting because Shamika and I kind of had the same dynamic in our relationship where I was the more outgoing, outspoken, social
Hmm.
butterfly. And she's, once she's familiar and knows you, then
Right,
she opens up.
right.
But she gets stage fright. She doesn't,
Yeah,
like to. She's an introvert. She'd rather sit
right,
home with a book and read it than
right,
go out and meet new people. And
right,
so we had to kind of we had to figure that one out too. And whether there were times when she like, well, you could just go ahead and I'll just chill back here.
right.
And then I'm always cognizant of where she is and how she's feeling, and always want to check up on her and make sure that she's comfortable. And so we had to deal with that. Communication is so important in any relationship. And I remember when we first started off our first year, it felt like we were in competition with one another. Like we were
Interesting.
trying to outdo one another, or really when it came to knowledge and information, it was like, one of us would present an idea and the other would be, oh, I know that, or I already knew that, or so it was like
Right,
we were fighting with each other. It's like, okay, we're on the same team here. Let's
right,
kind of bring it back to the center, put Jesus in that center, and and then go from there. So um, as a new couple, still, probably still honeymooning to a degree. Uh,
right.
do you have advice that you would give to like young couples or new couples who are either looking to join the marriage club or are thinking
Right.
about this might be something that they're interested in the future.
Absolutely, man. I kind of refer to this a lot, especially when I speak, or just recently somebody had reached out to me about a friend who was applying for a job. They asked about weaknesses, strengths, so on and so forth. And I said, hey, I don't want to tell you how to do your job,
Yeah.
but the Enneagram, like the Enneagram is so powerful. And actually, it made a huge difference for me and Brianna in our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we're young in marriage, but I want to encourage or challenge any young couple who's thinking about marriage, or you're in your first stage of marriage, or even if you've been married for a long time,
Yeah.
but there's certain areas where you're still really struggling with, is understanding each other's, not only like your love language, but how each other operates.
Yeah.
That's been huge for us, bro. Like when I'm healthy, like spiritually, mentally, physically, I will operate a certain way. When I am when I am unhealthy,
Mm-hmm.
I also operate a certain way, right? Because
Yeah.
of my wiring. And I
Exactly.
love the Enneagram so much because it helps you maybe understand and learn your weaknesses, but also your strengths when you're healthy and unhealthy.
Okay.
And when you understand that, and you understand even your partner's like Enneagram, the way that
Mm-hmm.
they're wired, it actually helps out how to communicate with them.
Gotcha.
Dude, it's been so huge for me and Bree because it's like I didn't know how to react when she would have anxiety episodes.
Okay.
Because when she has an anxious episode, it takes her away from maybe doing daily tasks or certain things that I'm expecting as a husband. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yes.
But I didn't understand. Well, it's because she's in a spot where she's a little weaker or vulnerable. So I need to understand that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Enneagram has been huge for us. So if you've never, done that test or learned what your partner's like, what their makeup is,
Yeah.
man, look into that because there's so much life bringing that you can, you guys can navigate really as a team. Like I love how you said it to here. Like we were like almost going against each other, like competing.
Yeah.
But man, marriage is such a man. We're on the same team. You know what I'm saying? We're trying to make points for us. This is
Yeah.
our family. This is
Yeah.
us. And I'm glad that I learned that early. That it's not me against my wife, but man, we're in this together. Man,
Exactly.
that made such a huge difference. So
Exactly.
that's my kind of advice or encouragement.
Cool. I like that. I'm not familiar with the Enneagram. Is that
Enneagram, right? Look
okay?
it up.
I am
Mm-hmm,
from
mm-hmm.
I'm familiar with the 5 love languages and things like that,
Okay,
but I'll definitely have to look into that some more and see
right,
what that's about. Um,
right.
but it kind of surprises me that Brianna has that anxiety because I know she's a singer, right? And
Yeah,
she used to sing at SeaWorld and other
yep,
places. She leads worship, and
right.
so I guess a lot of times you don't associate um, anxiety or even 'cause I guess it might not be. I guess stage fright might not be the same thing as anxiety, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe type of it. But that's interesting that that I'm finding that out about her because she
Yeah.
always seems like a confident singer, and when you see her on stage, so very interesting.
I like that you brought that up because for her, she went to school right for the arts. She went to
Oh,
school in Manhattan. The big goal was Broadway and so forth. But this is the thing is she was able to kind of hide behind,
hmm.
like as being an actress, right?
Yeah,
She can hide behind the persona of who she's playing on paper.
right, right.
Or when she would make YouTube videos, she was able to almost hide behind the camera,
Wow,
right?
I
There's no
see.
interaction in a way. So her on stage is like, hey, I memorized this song where the worship or
Hmm.
this character, so I can play that almost persona and
Right.
I'm confident. But when it was just Brianna, just
Hmm.
raw Brianna, it was hard, man.
Just
So
wow.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
kudos to her for working
right.
through that and to you for supporting her in that. So are you still singing, brother?
Not as much as I would like to,
Hmm.
because we have a whole worship team now. But
Yeah.
I do get on the mic here and there. You know what I'm saying?
You gotta
Do like,
flex a little bit.
right, right.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to get back in the studio, trying to
That's
work on
good.
some more original music. Um And I got a goal. I had a set a goal earlier this year to record like a Christmas EP or something with about 6 or 7 songs, some originals, some covers of a few of my
Nice.
favorites. And so I've been working with a good friend of mine who's actually a worship pastor here in San Diego as well. And we went to college together and everything. And so we worked together on music. And it's just, with COVID and the studio, a lot of the studios are shutting down, and I think they're starting to kind of relax some of their rules now.
Hmm.
But I definitely want to get back in the studio, finish working
Right.
on some of this music, and shoot, I might have to call you and Brienne for a couple of sessions to
That's
give me
what's up,
some
man.
background vocals, some a little flavor.
There you go. There you go. Tahir, let me kind of reverse that on you. Let's talk about that just a little bit, man.
Okay.
So talking about music,
Hmm.
some of your passions, man. I know that you've mentioned this before. Doing radio hosting, stuff like
Yeah.
that. Music is a huge passion for you. Um, how does that kind of play into your God story? How does that
Hmm.
play into your relationship with the Lord? Like, what is worship music? What does that mean to you? And
Yeah.
expressing that, what does that mean to you, man?
Well, worship music, and actually, I would actually venture to say that music is totally God inspired when it comes to me. My introduction to music, if you will, I think I was singing Christian church songs before I was singing any R&B, before I was
Mm.
doing, before I was jamming to Boys to Men. I was jamming to the Winans and Take Six
All
and
right,
those
all right.
and Commission, back in the late 80s. And so it's music has always been one of my strong suits, and singing has always been a kind of a release for me. It's like I kind of put music and running, because I ran track in high school as well, competitively. And so I would think about when I would go to track practice and I would run, it's like all the cares in the world would go away because I'm focusing on running track. When I'm singing or writing music, and when I'm in worship, all the cares go away because I'm focused on Jesus, and I'm focused on the Holy Spirit, and being one in one mind with the Holy Spirit in those times. And so just eventually, it was really interesting because I thought about doing it like my personal talk before this episode, and I was thinking about doing it on my evolution in music. But
Ooh,
I
nice.
see the Holy Spirit knew I didn't need to do that because you were going to bring it up. Uh,
There you go.
and so I started off like 10 years old. My first lead role was singing "Go Tell It on a Mountain" in
Let's
the
get
in
it.
our school's Christmas program at 10 years old. And so from that, I just kept singing. I started singing at church, in the choirs. By the time I was 16, I was directing the choir. By the time, and then my senior year in high school, I joined one of the choirs, the main concert choir at the church, which did everything from classical to gospel, and everything in between. And so we got to sing at fancy hotels downtown Chicago, and I had got leads in singing Donny Hathaway songs, uh,
Nice.
and then went to college, and even to the point where I was, my freshman year, my roommate and I started a little R&B group called Just for the Ladies, and
Let's go. I love it.
just for the
Oh,
ladies. And so we did that group and progressed with it. And then some of the guys were starting to write their own original music, which kind of was veering away from the image that I wanted to portray. So I actually stepped away from that group, as they continued on, but I stepped away because I was like, that's not the type of music that I want to portray. And so I
wow.
ended up kind of going back to my church roots, and
Nice.
and started singing with one of the community choirs there. Actually, before that, I was asked by my neighbor, my college neighbor. There was a pastor that would come and pick him up and take him to a campus off campus church, but they knew I sang, and they knew I did music, and that I was Christian, and worked it with the church. And so he asked me to come and direct their youth choir, their children's
Oof.
choir, which I had really hadn't done before.
Yeah.
But I got such a joy out of that. And then from there, I started singing with the community choir that was based out of that church, and began leading worship a lot more at that point, and just kept learning and learning and watching other people worship. And that was, at the time when Yolanda Adams was coming through, and Fred Hammond,
Mm.
and Mary and all these other, Kirk Franklin, Marvin
Mm.
Winans,
Mm.
some of those stellar, just monumental gospel figures were coming through. And so I began to study worship music. I began to study gospel music and consume nothing but gospel music for a long time. And so from there, and it's really interesting, all the maybe the first couple of dozen songs that I received, that I wrote, I should say, I received them while I was in worship. Like,
Wow.
I would be in worship,
Wow.
and that's when God downloads music to me. That's when he downloads songs, melodies, uh, harmonies, choruses,
Mm.
everything. He would download it to me while I was actually in worship. And I remember the very first song was called "My Testimony," and I was in worship, trying to focus, trying, I wasn't like distracted or anything. But while
Right.
we were worshiping, the words just started coming to into my spirit, and was like
Mm.
looking back over my life. I've seen that your hand has always been there to
It's
guide
good.
me, oh Jehovah, when I needed something. And it was like, so all these words just start flowing and flowing, verse after verse. And it just, from there, I've like I said, right now I've written about three dozen songs. Actually, I didn't say it, but I've written about 3 dozen songs.
Wow.
95% of them are worship, Christian, or choir songs. There's a couple of Christmas songs in there, as I mentioned, and then there's a couple of wedding songs. So love songs, wedding
Nice.
songs. I sang one at my wedding, and I sang one
Oh,
at my godbrother's wedding. So years ago, 20 years ago. So I wrote my first song probably in 1997, and they're still coming up, still writing new stuff. And so that all, music was my benchmark for
mm,
where I was in terms of my relationship with God, because the music would be influenced by what was actually happening in my heart and what was happening around
right.
me, and how God was influencing me. So great question, man.
Wow, dude, man, that was powerful, bro. I love how you said like while you were worshiping, God would kind of download some of
Hmm.
these, he would inspire some things,
Exactly.
man. So and this is kind of the reason why, like, you asked me, hey, do you still sing? Yeah,
Hmm.
sometimes I do, but
Yeah.
God actually has been turning the corner for me in that area of creativeness. And actually I ventured into spoken word
Really?
types. Yes, bro. And God has, just like you, just kind of inspiring some things while I would listen to worship, like certain words.
Hmm.
And for me, it wasn't musical. It was
Okay.
spoken. It was a communication in a different way. And I
Hmm.
remember one in particular. He spoke to me while I was like in the line at Costco to like get some gas.
Yeah.
But God was just giving me something, and I was like, man, I'm gonna put this out in my notes, and that actually became a worship spoken word that we used at
Oh,
church, man.
nice.
Oh my
Nice.
goodness.
I
So
like
yeah,
that.
God started kind of opening up different avenues
They're
for
very
creativeness.
closely related, because
Right.
like some of the songs that I've done started off as poetry, almost, or a spoken word,
Mm. Mm.
and then melodies formed out of it.
Right.
And so yeah, so it's a very tight knit group that you have with spoken word, poetry, and
Yeah.
music. Um,
Right.
so I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Um, so you have transitioned from the student leader
Yeah.
to now the head pastor. I guess what are some of the biggest differences that you've noticed in your transitioning?
Right. So, that's a great question, man. So, I was a student pastor at my church for 2 years before, where I am now. And
Mm-hmm.
even back then, for those 2 years, bro, I was bivocational. So
Yeah.
I was doing the nursing thing. I was a nurse, LVN,
Yeah.
and I was a student pastor at the same time. So a bivocational pastor, that's like a whole different
It
beast,
is.
bro.
It is.
So, anyways, the difference is now I'm not telling jokes about, yo, what's lit and what's the newest, what's the newest dance or TikTok move. Now, it's kind of changed the arena,
Yeah.
obviously working more in the adult section. So there's different verbiage, there's different ways that connect with,
Of course.
folks who are in different stage of life, bro,
Mm-hmm.
marriage, with kids. There's different, problems and struggles there.
Yeah.
So in my kind of evolution of growing into where I am now, it's like,
Yes.
okay, now changing the hats to my audience looks so much different. Now I'm actually ministering to the whole family.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
I
I'm
hear
not
you.
I'm not just yeah, I'm not just ministering to the 13, 14-year old, which is super important,
Mm-hmm.
but now like it's like, okay, it's across the board. I'm ministering to the dad who is the breadwinner of the home, but he's struggling with this.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm ministering to the mom who has late nights as a nurse, and she asked prayer for her father who just passed away.
Right.
So there's just so many different things now that I'm thinking of. Again, dude, I don't come to it like I know everything now, or like
Right.
I'm like the best fit for it. But I truly believe God is just starting to unravel some things in me, help me grow in my
Mm-hmm.
leadership administration. So just I think it's just thinking about it at a different angle, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
I hear you.
So
I used to
yeah.
hear people say that he doesn't call the equipped. He
Oof.
equips the called.
Come
And
on.
so because you were willing to step into that position, you would step into
Right.
that relationship with
Hmm.
that people and that congregation, then he gives you the tools to work, work that whole scene, and to be what you need to be for those for your
Right.
people. And so
Right. Right.
so kudos to you for being open,
Right.
because some people don't want to take that leap from youth pastor to head pastor. Some people are just fine hanging out with the young folks and chilling
Sure.
and doing
Right.
TikTok videos and
Right. Right. Right.
oh man. And so so you're as you mentioned earlier, you're Filipino by culture and by
Hmm.
ethnicity. um um there's a huge Filipino community here in San Diego. And
Yes,
so,
sir.
and I didn't even realize till recently that the Philippines was actually a US territory, like for a long, long time.
Hmm.
Have you ever traveled to PI or,
Absolutely. Absolutely. We used to actually go almost every single year as a kid and
really?
even throughout high school. Yeah, man. We'd have reunions and, go to the different islands and stuff.
Hmm.
It's been quite a bit of some time since we've been back.
Okay.
But yeah, been to, Palawan, Boracay, Manila, the provinces where my dad's from, where my mom's from. But
Yeah.
man, been there before, but wish we can go back.
Nice.
Definitely wish we can go back.
Oh,
So
cool. Cool.
great.
That's good. Have you done a lot of other international travel as well, or?
Not so much. I wish we could say. I mean, me and my wife, like, we try to go to Cancun every year. That's where we have
Hey,
like, our
oh good.
honeymoon, and a huge thing for us is travel, but a
Hmm.
lot more domestic than I would say international. But that's definitely like part of our big plan. We want to do this. We want to go see the world.
Yeah.
Is a kind of a big part of what we want to do. So
And take that message to the world.
telling you,
Yeah.
bro.
So I thought it was extremely gracious of you a few months back to reach out to solicit my perspective
Yeah.
of the racial issues that the country has faced in light of the George Floyd murder. And
Mhm.
I know MLK, Martin Luther King, for those who don't know, he once said that 11 o'clock Sunday morning is the most segregated time in America. And I also recently read an article that was claiming that there's possibly more racism in the church than in the secular arena.
Mm.
I guess what would be your thoughts on that?
Wow, that's great. Um, when I think about segregation
Hmm.
and the church in particular, I actually witnessed that as a kid growing up. So
Okay.
the church that I went to was primarily Filipino,
Okay.
99.9% Filipino to be exact. Um, we're old school, right? Ultra conservative, and I'm not too sure if there's more a racial thing than it was. Like we're only sticking to our bubble. You know
Okay.
what I'm saying? We
This
don't
is what we
hang
know.
right. We
Right.
don't hang out with those people. We don't hang out with that church because their beliefs might be a little bit different on this.
Hmm.
And we were just, but that actually translated a lot to even showing God's love to people who were different from us, bro.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
There was this huge gap or separation of loving somebody who doesn't think like you do, who doesn't operate like you do, who just even might be opposed to what you believe. And I think that became a huge gap for us, making headway for the kingdom. Does that make sense?
It does.
So I don't know if it was more racial,
Hmm.
but it became a, hey, we just hang out with us. We don't reach out to
Hmm.
them. You know what I'm saying? And that almost became it operated in different areas of our ministries, man.
Wow.
So that was huge for me when I'm, kind of transitioned out to where I kind of grew up. God really opened the door to help me see, like, man, we are the big C church. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
not just center church. It's not just this church or that church. It's like, man, hey, we're all believers. We might have different preferences,
Right.
but we have the same goal,
Yeah.
and it's to help connect people to find an authentic encounter with God. You
Exactly.
know, and I feel like there's a lot of churches out there, that they operate under that stigma. So then they kind of put the hands up of, no, we're okay,
Yeah.
or hey, you look different,
Hmm.
hey, you operate different, so I'm just gonna, right?
Yes.
So it wasn't until recent years, especially with my wife, she's huge with kind of injustices. I
Yeah.
love that about her. She's really open minded. And for those who don't know my wife is she's biracial. So
Okay.
she's half Mexican, half German. She looks like a white girl. If you just, you know what I'm saying? If you see her on the street, like, oh, that's a white girl.
She does.
But yeah, right, right. And she an amazing, just amazing heart for, injustice as well.
Awesome.
So she's really taught me a lot of things, bro,
Good.
about that, about injustices happening in our community with
Hmm.
different, racial injustices. So long story short is, yeah, I think I've experienced that as well. Even being a biracial couple,
Yes.
bro, man, we've had a lot of stares. A lot of people
Really.
yeah, man, I don't know if it's cool with you, but I'd like to share even an
Go for,
experience we had.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't want to just call it like a racial issue, but it was I'm gonna treat you different because you look different type thing.
Okay.
So this past February, we went for we stayed in Little Italy, and
Yes.
we went to a restaurant. I won't name it, but we had dinner there, great Italian food, so on and so forth. But we were treated differently because and looking at the people around us who kind of were different culture than I was, right?
Hmm.
They were getting the utmost service. They were getting
Wow.
speed service. They were just, was everything cool. But when it came to us, like our food was super late. The
Wow.
lady who was serving us was like, just kind of, not. You could tell she didn't care that we were
She
there,
was
if that makes
nonchalant.
sense.
Yeah.
Right, right. She served my food to another table, and she she straight up took the food from them. They already started on it and gave it to me. I was like,
No.
whoa, bro,
Right.
yeah. So I said, hey, can I talk to your manager? Kind of said a couple things, and I was gracious in how I did it. Praise
Hmm.
God. But I was mad. To tell you the truth, I was
Of
mad.
course.
And they kind of fixed things, but she was just like not having it. That I kind of
Wow.
stood up like that. But I was just like, man, really? Like,
Yeah.
are we going through this right now? Like,
Of
for
course.
real? And, me and my wife, as a biracial couple, we've kind of gone through some of those instances together where it's like, people would stare or whatever, or treat us differently.
Mm-hmm.
But it was something that I wasn't really used to,
Yeah. Wow.
until I met Brianna. So, but yeah, that's
Exactly.
kind of where we are.
That's I'm sorry that you had to go through that. And I mean, I'm sure there are thousands, millions, of people that are experience that so
Right,
much. I guess I've been kind of curious. Like I said, I'm glad that you reached out to me, but I guess what what I guess bubbled up inside of you to make you want to make that call to me to find out, about the Black experience, about some of
right,
the injustices with the criminal justice system, and
right,
just discrimination in general with the black community.
right. I feel like um, I didn't really understand truly
Mm-hmm.
what, where you were coming from, or other folks
Right.
from my circle of influence, right?
Yes.
And you see things on social media, you see things on the news, and then there's two different opposite sides, like, hey, Black Lives Matter, and every people will say all lives matter, and then there's kind of a tension that grows.
Yeah.
And I wanted to come to it with a Jesus perspective.
Yes.
I think I wanted to invite the conversation of, hey, can we have an open and honest conversation about what even you've been through? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing a lot of people say this and that. I want to go
Right.
to the guys that I love, the guys that I know. I know their character, and I want to hear their story.
Yeah.
So that really bubbled up in me. Like, I really truly want to understand,
Good.
because, I only hear one side, and I could be like, oh, I'm just going to go with that guy. But I want to know, man, what are you feeling? What are
Yeah.
you going through? What is God speaking to you about? So I think that's what really rose up in me, that, hey, why don't you reach out to guys like Tahir?
Mm-hmm.
One of my other buddies, his name is Chuck. He goes to our church.
Okay.
Amazing man of God. A dude has been going to our church for a long time. And hey, Chuck, tell me about your experience.
Yeah.
So that's what really opened the door for me. Like, hey, I want to hear about, what does that look like to you? What is going on in your heart? Because I felt like I
Exactly.
didn't understand. So
Yeah. Well, man, it takes a lot to get the courage to do that. And we don't know what we don't know. And
right,
so
right,
so it's incumbent upon us to reach out and to research and to find out what other people's experiences are. And by doing that, you get to gain a level of compassion, understanding, that many people avoid. They don't want. Some people don't even want to feel what we feel, or to
yeah,
or to even experience what you experience.
mm-hmm,
People just rather live in their world, and think that everything is just okie dokie. And
right,
unfortunately, unfortunately, we live in a world with people.
yeah,
and,
yeah,
and people come in all shapes, colors, sizes, mindsets, and even levels of hatred in terms of other people. And so I'm really glad that that you had the wherewithal to address your lack of information and knowledge, and to be able to talk to people that you trust, and people. I think that's how you word it. It's like, I want to talk to somebody I trust,
right, yeah,
who can tell me what's really happening, and so that you could have a better understanding. So I thought that was top notch, man. I appreciate that from you. um I don't know. I think we've covered quite a bit of topics here. When um, I think that the work that you're doing at Center Church is wonderful. I'm able to catch some of your services, not all of them.
yeah.
Just I'm watching you. No, I'm watching you.
That Jesus me.
Right.
So
And so
checking up on the saints.
but I love your attitude. I love your delivery. And I mean, you've always had kind of like a bubbly, a positive personality, and it comes across, in your messages, It comes across in the way you hold yourself, your demeanor, your speak. I love that you keep the comedy and the laughs in your messaging as well. And you can see Josh, you can see your personality come through the screen as you're relating to people and as you're telling story and teaching about the Word of God. So definitely wish you, all the best. I know that Center Church has services streaming on Facebook, and you have do you have a podcast, or the church has a podcast, or where?
We have a podcast for our sermons.
Okay.
But we actually are going to be opening up a podcast soon, so be on the lookout, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. So where can people find the services for Center Church and the podcast?
Absolutely. So if you just go to the podcast section on your iOS, if you just look up Center Church SD or Center Church San Diego, you'll find it. It'll pop up. If you go to centerchurchsd.com, all our services are streamed there.
On
We're
the
on
website?
Facebook Live. Yes, sir.
Okay.
We're on Facebook live stream every single Sunday morning at 10 a.m. And also YouTube as well. You can find us on YouTube too.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah.
Cool. Well, make sure you go and you seek out Center Church, watch their podcast, check out my man Josh and some of his messages, and see as he karate chops the Word of God and breaks it down for you.
I like it.
Right. I hope you guys have been blessed by this conversation. It's been a pleasure talking with you, my brother. I look forward to catching up with you in person very, very soon. Any last words you want to leave with the people?
Yeah, just man, thanks for kind of hopping on, guys, and Tahir. Amazing dude. Bro, I love what you're doing. I can't wait to see what God continues to do in you and through you. And thank you for being such an encouragement to me, and I'm sure to all your listeners here today. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, man. God bless you. And that is it for another episode of Kingdom Conversations with Tahir, the Gospel Engineer. Until next time, see ya.